Bricks and Minifigs is your one-stop shop for all things LEGO. Hit the link below to find a store near you.
Well, I'm Jon, and this is my first time on Beyond the Brick, so thanks for having me. This is the Mines of Moria, as built out of too many LEGO pieces for me to have counted over the course of about 6 months. But most of that time was spent raking through bulk bin at the local Bricks and Minifigs, getting as much gray as I could, dark gray as I could.
There is a tremendous amount of dark gray in this build.
Well, and what's really, really hard with dark gray is so that it doesn't end up looking like a big blob. So trying to find ways to do textures and to do accent colors to create depth was really the trick. It was really the trick.
Yeah, let's dive into that a bit then, to kind of take us through some of those different spots where you've kind of textured it differently or created different wall effects throughout the build.
Nice. All right. So down here on the bottom level, which is basically the mine level, there's that moment when Gandalf and the Balrog fall into the water. So I was like, how am I going to cover up dark gray plate and have it look at least visually interesting? So I went with the 1x cheese slopes in dark blue to try to create a water effect. And then, of course, when you think of the Mines of Moria, there's pillars everywhere. So to keep this from just being like a long hall of pillars, I was like, I think if I set it at an angle, I'll be able to get a bunch of pillars in, but have it at least visually interesting. Now, dwarven pillars have these huge, they're like carved from the stone, so they've got these huge cutouts on there. So I used the corner piece at the bottom, and what I learned really quickly is that they don't make an inverse piece to stack on the top. So I basically had to build the pillars in half and then flatten out the studs and then marry them together. So you're basically looking at a mirror image of the bottom on the top, and then I went the studs not on top on the side, to pin them together. So this top layer, the second layer is resting on the first, on plates at the pillar level, and then it's snapped in with plates at the back edge. And then to create the texture, it was layered plates, because when you look at the dwarven architecture, which is basically designed by John Howe and Alan Lee for the films, they basically set it back as carved angles. The architecture is brutish, so there are no curves in anything besides the orc shields, because the dwarves don't do anything in circles. So trying to find a way to square everything off meant that tiling the layers back was essential. I did the door frames on level 2. I saw somebody on Flickr. There's a guy who does really great builds, and he did every chapter of The Lord of the Rings. And so I cribbed. When you see something that's perfect, you can't adapt it. You basically do it as an homage. So if I knew the name, I would give credit here. But that first layer of mine, I then knew that the troll had to have a place to live, so why not a mithril mine? There's going to be a mithril mine. I don't know that orcs can do anything with mithril. So that hole is where the cave lives. And we're going to meet him later when they get to Balin's tomb. I also knew that I didn't want to do anything that you had really seen on film, because one, everybody has done that and has already done a great job with that. And then two, you've then got to do it exactly as you see it in the movie. So when you get to that second level, I thought a passageway that they have walked through to get them from point A to point B, with a bridge that would allow us to display the minifigures in a way that's at least visually interesting. And then if it's suspended in air, it's going to also give it some depth. So I put that corner shape in there so that the bridge would go from one place to another. The real challenge is to make curves without putting round things in. So each of the edges of the bridge are snapped into a rotating turntable that's then covered with the angular plates. And then it's joined in the middle with hinge bricks. So underneath the hinge bricks are sealing up the holes and allowing the bridge to rest at an angle. And it's actually the weight of the bridge pushing out against the circle pieces that are keeping it in place. If you lift it up, it'll lift right off. Of course, there's a lot of dwarven statues spread throughout there. The great difficulty with variety with those statues is that there's not a lot of dark gray minifigure beards. There's really only one, and that's the robotic Davy Crockett from the Lego movie. So I put two dark gray statues up in the upper level, but the lower ones I went with black, because there's a lot more black elements to do that with. Once I put it all together, I realized that it was really dark and you couldn't see any of the levels besides the one with the doors. So I just got a couple of the battery-operated votive candles from Amazon. It comes with a remote control that allows you to set the colors and the intensity to lighten up the spaces. And then the upper layer is, we know from the books that Durin had a hall and Durin had a tower. And so Gandalf defeats the Balrog at Durin's tower. And I was like, what would the throne room of Durin have looked like had it been ransacked by orcs? And that goblin with the great chin from Minifig Series 24 gets to sit on Durin's throne. Yeah. I think the only other piece of note is you got to make a lot of dwarven skeletons. So the good news is throw in a beard and some armor. And the good news is that the armor that comes with the blacksmith shop, just the shoulder pieces, allows you to put a dirty beard on some of these old guys. It makes it pretty fun. So
There you go. I love the rundown of the build there, and it's so fantastic. The lights definitely add a lot. It's always a shame when I see a build that has a lot of details, but then due to not having enough light, you can't really appreciate everything inside there.
absolutely. Well, yeah, thanks. It was one of those last minute ads. How do we hide the lights in the structure? So there's one up in Durin's tower. The rest, there's a spider web hiding them. And to be honest, it was like literally $21 to do this amount of lighting. So I'm learning lights as I go, only because I discovered it was too dark in the middle of it. So what you pointed out was true of me.
What are some of the furniture details up here in terms of kind of how you built that, and you get those like very realistic looking kind of bookcases and tables and things?
Yeah. Awesome. So a few years back, I was thinking to myself, how would you make a bookcase that actually had some sort of architectural element? Or how do you make chairs that are squatty enough that a dwarf would sit on them? So knowing that it was going to need to be degraded and broken down, I just started building, layering the tiles on top of the plates so then you can splinter things. And then the bookcases came from the panels give you the ability to have recessed areas. So I did panels so that the books would fit in, and then I spun some outward so that there were some outer supports, and then just started using the geometric shapes that they give you. The new pyramid pieces, the 1x1 pyramid pieces, really give you the ability to finish things off, uncover a stud in a way that is visually pleasing with that architectural scheme. So it literally came down to working with plates over and over and over again to try to get something that worked.
One of the details that caught my eye on this top layer is the way that you use, is it like the axle pieces to kind of add some wall accents there and kind of create, break up what you were talking about earlier, which is just kind of flat gray walls.
Absolutely. Yeah, so breaking up the gray wall was really difficult because pieces in this color are hard to get, but people never look in the Technic bins. So those Technic axle holder bricks that have the little cross in them, it's a geometric shape that's not at an angle. I probably would have filled it in with rounds until I found the Technic brick piece. And since there was a ton of them, it allowed me to basically make backdrops that are visually interesting, and then combining that with the grooved corduroy bricks and the profile bricks allowed me to break it up. I think if I had to do it over again, I would try to use some more map pieces to make a map on that back wall, just to break it up even more with color. But I'm counting on the pillars to do that. And those upper pillars, they actually spin because they're not pinned into place. This is basically the technique from the town hall where you use the rail bricks, and then they sit on 1x1 pegs so that you could get, it would have to be locked in or locked in, but to be able to adjust it as needed. I just made sure they weren't locked into place.
I like the way you did kind of the snow on top in terms of the just kind of dumping the pieces there, and it creates kind of, this almost natural look because it's just kind of all over the place then.
Yeah, the goal there was, 6 months in, I would have to do the exact same thing with white to make a mountainside. And I'm literally like, oh my word, I'm not going to have time. So I just built channels, poured white brick in, and if you look too closely, you'll see that all of my yellowed white brick went into it because it yellows so quickly. So hiding the yellowed white brick was also another technique to disguise, hey, this yellow goes bad quick. So
in terms of moving this to a show and setting it up, how does this break down and move around?
Great question. So the tower comes off the top. Each floor is its own piece, and since they're each of these panels here disguises the seam. So the seam and snapping it on. Basically, the bricks snap into place, and then you hide the seam with the greebling. So I'll pull all of the edges off each of the layers, and then they'll all separate. And then each of the L pieces will load onto a card table, get loaded in the back of a car, and driven off at the end of it. But it's sturdy enough that you can just lift each of them off once you pull the greebling off.
That works super well. So I love your passion and knowledge for this scene here and for Lord of the Rings, everything you've been describing here. Do you have plans for more builds based on the Lord of the Rings kind of theme, or do you have other plans for the future?
That's a great question. One of the most difficult things when you build something is there's the thing you want to build, and then there's all the scenery you have to build to justify, like, hey, are you going to build a forest so that Rivendell can sit in it? So knowing where to start and stop is hard. And, the rock work of building a cave out of a non-repeatable pattern was so dense. I think probably the next thing I'm going to build is going to have way more smooth textures in it. So if you think I love the Lord of the Rings, but I love Star Wars, I love Stranger Things. If Lego gives us minifigs, and then the parts you don't need to give us sets, give us the minifigs, let the builders build something. So yeah, this may be the last Lord of the Rings thing I do for a while, just because Lord of the Rings, there's a reason they picked New Zealand to be a supporting actor in the movie. The locations in Lord of the Rings are as important as the characters. So I'll have to either fall in love with the location like I did Moria, or have to find a cheap, easy way to build forests, mountains, and swamps. So if you build Lego, you know this.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing what you do in the future. This build is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for taking us through all the details here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for talking to me. This is a real privilege and an honor. It's been really fun to do. Thanks for all the work y'all do to get Lego out as a hobby and to help people find their place in it.